90 miles. That's the distance from Florida to Cuba as the missile flies. It's October 1962, and a U.S. spy plane has just discovered ballistic missiles and launch sites in Cuba capable of sending nuclear warheads to the United States. The White House in Washington, D.C. is on high alert. The Soviet Union is behind the installations. President John F. Kennedy addressed the nation on October 22, 1962.
Within the past week, unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island. The purpose of these bases can be none other than to provide a nuclear strike capability against the Western Hemisphere.
The Cold War has already pitted the United States against communist leaders around the world. Cuban leader Fidel Castro now has a friend in Soviet Union leader Nikita Khrushchev. 18 months ago, Castro survived a coup attempt led by the United States government in the botched Bay of Pigs invasion. The ordeal was an embarrassment for U.S. President Kennedy and brought Cuba and the Soviet Union even closer together. The United States had trained, armed, and sent roughly 1,500 exiled Cubans back to their country to start an uprising, and disguised U.S. airplanes that bombed Cuban Air Force bases. But tepid U.S. air and naval support doomed the plan, and Castro's military swiftly squashed the operation. Now, the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 would be a turning point in the Cold War. The 13-day showdown marked the closest we've come to full-scale nuclear war. U.S. Marine Corps Lieutenant James Lyle Steele is newly back from Vietnam. The United States was preparing to send combat troops to fight the communist North Vietnamese Army and Viet Cong guerrilla fighters, but hadn't yet done so, at least officially. As a Vietnam advisor in 1961, Steele learned the enemy was not only motivated, but creative in combat. Now home and working at the Marine Corps Recruit Depot Parris Island in South Carolina, Steele is tasked with getting the next batch of recruits ready for battle. He is eager to get back to Vietnam himself, but now news about Soviet missiles on Cuba has spread. What he does next defies logic, but Steele is driven and impatient. He wants to know what the U.S. troops in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba are doing to prepare. I am Ashley McGlone, an investigative journalist and granddaughter of retired U.S. Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel James Lyle Steele. This is Reconnaissance Man, a series about Steele's life and 30-year military career. Here is Episode 2, Caribbean Confrontations.
I dearly love to talk about Guantanamo Bay. When Kennedy had his missile crisis, he had warned the Russians they had to take their missiles out or he would take extreme action or he didn't say I'll kill all of you, but it was you'll pay a big price. And so there was a point offshore that was the DMZ, you might say. And if a ship crossed that after a certain date and time, we had warned them we might sink him. We'll skip back a little bit, and I was assigned at Parris Island to the recruit training depot.
Back at Parris Island, Steele is the officer in charge of the physical training section and has quite the reputation.
I was the head of the PT section, which included bayonet, hand-to-hand combat, swimming, the obstacle course, and a confidence course, which was a much bigger, difficult course. And so my guys could do so many more pull-ups than any of the other platoons. And my series were just head and shoulders above the others.
How did you get your guys to be a head above the rest? What was your, again, manner, demeanor, expectation?
Well, I guess maybe a good word would be hard-ass. Boy, they had no peace if they weren't cutting it, find a way to get them out there exercising or trying to do pull-ups or something. And the others, they have a PT period at 5 p.m. till 5:30, and they take them out there. And I was chasing their ass around the field, looking for fat to squeeze. And then, truth is, I had quite a following. The troops kind of loved me. I set the example in everything. high PFT, physical fitness test. You had to do that every so often. And then on a rifle range, pistol range, I usually outshot everybody. We had what they called competition in arms program. So each regiment would field a team for pistol competition and a separate one for rifle competition. And I just didn't ask him. I just took over that rifle team and pistol team from our regiment. So I became team captain and coach and the workhorse. But we always won everything. Always. Absolutely always.
Though he pushed his recruits to their limits, he expected even more of himself physically. His stamina was practically unmatched.
When I first went in, I could only sleep like 4 hours. I could lay there and be still, but only 4 hours. So like when I got up to Recon, I'd go outside and sleep for 4 hours, and then I'd get up and run the big loop, like 6 blocks around, and be back to get them up at Reveille. And then I did all the other physical stuff they did too. And so I was really a water walker. They had tryouts for Recon, and sometimes they'd had up to 100 people come over, try out. And they had me run them. And my directions were run them till there's only about 10 left.
Because not everybody's built like that. Not even people who work really, really hard, it doesn't come that naturally.
That's right. And the people that do a lot of push-ups, they can't necessarily run. But running was very important in the PT skill set. You had to run. And I'd run there, boom, pass out. You pass out running forward, your face goes, psh. Ones that passed out were the ones selected many times. They'd push themselves that far. And you throw up first, and they run some more. And I could have gone more than that, but I only had 10 left. That's what they wanted.
Though valuable to the military stateside, Steele was eager to use his training back in the field. Then the Cuban threat came along.
So I'm watching the nose real close about the deadline's coming closer. And I had way back gone over to the Marine Corps Air Wing, who had that base. And I said I wanted to look at their classified information on Vietnam because I was putting in to go back. And I wanted to get up to date with what had happened and all that. So the guy that ran the classified shop says, "Oh no, only the CO could do that." I said, "Great, let's go see him." What's to lose, So we went over there, and he was tickled to death. Actually, I was doing him a favor. Well, he put me on their access list for their classified material at the Air Wing, and I wasn't even a member of the Air Wing. I was over at Pears Island. So I would go over there, and that not to take papers out or anything. I'd go in and look at them. And so I'd go over there quite often and get caught up on what was happening in Vietnam.
Access to flight logs would enable Steele to undertake an unsanctioned mission of his own making. He came up with a ruse to board a C-130 airplane bound for Cuba with only his .38 special revolver hidden in his pack.
It wasn't tactical at all. It was just logistic flight. And I saw where one was coming in to Beaufort on a certain date. So I real quick went back to my unit and got leaf papers. And I said, I was going to go to Nebraska because I didn't want them to check on me. Yeah, I got to go see Mommy and Daddy. So I had my leave papers. And I went over a couple times and watched how they boarded planes, where they went through and everything. So on the Marlog day, I went over there and I had on my, what nowadays we call like a SWAT uniform. It's a field uniform, not a dress uniform. And my little crappy backpack the Marine Corps had was hardly carry anything. But that's all I had, my little backpack and my coat. So it looked like I was going back to Gitmo Bay from leave there. Well, I watched and I saw the people getting on the plane go through the door. It's a staging area. You go in. It's like a civilian airport. You gather up and then you go out. So I stayed out of sight till all of them were out. And I could look right past them and see them getting on the transport. So I waited till like the last couple were getting on. I go charging through the gate, waving my leave papers. Now, there was nothing else looked like leave papers. They had a great big orange band across them. So I said, "Oh, leave." That's not lying. Right past them because it looked like it's time to get on or you miss it. And these two guys didn't know what to do. They just stood there looking dumbfounded while I went and got on a plane. So we flew down to Gitmo. They had a landing strip there. And then when they unloaded, I thought, oh, damn, they're going to have people up here. Where are you going? We'll take you there, you know. Mm-hmm. So I got up with the air crew, and they were working on the thing, you know, blocks under the wheels. And then they sent a van for them. So I got in a van with them, drove right down into the middle of the bake.
Now on base, what would he do and how would he evade detection from his own military? It turns out the chaos of the situation in Cuba would help.
Now, that situation with the missiles was deadly serious. They had brought in all kinds of CIA guys, people who claimed to be water delivery specialists, you know, and none of those people said anything to anyone else. Well, they were tight-lipped, and so I went down in there, and I discovered that the barracks, they had put bunk beds like 4 high, and if you wanted to sleep, you went in and found an empty one, and that's yours. They didn't try to assign them because there was too many people, and a lot of them didn't want their name listed someplace. So the mess hall was open 24 hours a day. You didn't need a mess pass like you would in a normal place. They couldn't handle all that. You want to eat, go in and eat. You want to sleep, go find a bunk. I just kind of acted like the spooks that didn't want to talk to anybody, because I didn't either. And then I walked the perimeter completely around Guantanamo Bay.
A U.S. Air Force video from just after the crisis, kept by the U.S. National Archives, described the military response during this period.
Immediate reinforcement of the Guantanamo force was of prime importance. From stations in the United States, Marine Corps units went into action. These were units which were ready to go on an instant's notice. Their weapons and equipment were already loaded in trucks which stood waiting outside their barracks. In minutes, they were on their way. Within hours, airlift was landing these troops in Guantanamo, enough of them to double the fighting strength available there. In addition to the troops brought by air and ship, still others would be held ready on board ships at sea. Whatever might come, the Marines on Gitmo were ready. Fighter bombers of the Tactical Air Command were armed. Rockets, bombs, ammunition, air support for any limited war ground operation which might develop. As we awaited the results of an exchange of notes between Khrushchev and the president, nuclear bombers flew their precise, disciplined patterns within reach of the Soviet heartland. And beneath the Atlantic, the Polaris squadrons, mobile nuclear launch pads, were fully prepared to carry out whatever order might come.
Steele's rationale for taking this covert mission actually stemmed from criticism the Marines had received. Once on the ground, he was not impressed.
So I'm saying, the Marine Corps has always been slammed for not making defensive positions worth a damn. And it was true. We didn't mess with that. So I want to go down there now that they've got lots of time. They know they're facing the Cubans and probably Russians. I want to see how they do the defense. So I figured a way to get down there. I had no authorization. They had shipped out all the families on the non-essential people out of Gitmo because they expected a fight. And that's primarily what I went down there for, is to see, with a lot of warning, knowing the threat was tremendous, how would you build up a defense? Well, was I surprised? They hadn't done diddle. They had a trench, and then every so often was a little side branch for a gun position in a trench. They didn't even have overhead protection against airburst artillery or mortars. And they were out there pitching balls, catching footballs, and good God. Boy, I went down there to learn a lesson. I did. Don't do what they did.
Steele said large piles of timber and corrugated metal meant for building defense shelters went unused.
I worked my way all around the perimeter, checking all the positions completely around. I was down there 7 days, and no one caught on. I was there for the deadline. So, tick, 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 boom, this is it. If you haven't moved your missiles, we're coming and getting them. So I thought, I may shoot a Russian before this is over.
It appeared the Cubans were taking the situation more seriously.
While I was there before that date, the Cubans would come roaring up in their armored personnel carriers and the fence. They'd stop right there, looking right at us, And then the troop carriers, they'd open up and the troops would come out, get online, practicing for the real thing. Then they'd load back up and leave. So exciting, especially since I had been at, Paris Island training recruits. Oh, there's no thrill there, I can assure you. So,
but who else rather than actually taking a vacation back to see family would rather sneak on a plane to Cuba?
How did family compare with Gitmo?
In the middle of a missile crisis. I mean, I'm actually shocked I've never heard that story before.
While he was in Cuba, Steele also got a glimpse of some new radio technology.
I'm in a bunk getting ready to go to sleep, and this guy comes in with a pretty sturdy briefcase. He laid it on the desk and looked around. He opened it up and pulled something out of each side, pulled something out of the front. It just became a monster machine that did burst transmissions. You type in the message you want to send, and you check, make sure it's right, and then you see, it goes, meh. That's all that happens. So this guy did that, and then he folded it all up and squished it together again. Oh, I was just tickled to see that.
So that was different than what you guys had been using in Vietnam.
We didn't have that.
And this isn't Morse code. This is something different?
Oh, yeah, it's burst transmission. I didn't see one of those in the Marine Corps till years later. We were always behind getting a new gear.
Why is that?
Well, we are Uncle Sam's misguided children.
As the crisis continued, President Kennedy and Khrushchev worked to resolve the conflict without war. Finally, Khrushchev agreed to remove the missiles from Cuba and return them to the Soviet Union on October 28, 1962.
So the day came that they had to have them out, and the deadline, here's a mark in the ocean, invisible line. And they had a couple trawlers come up, stop right there, and turn around and go back.
President Kennedy addressed the nation from the White House on November 2, 1962, and said in part,
"The Soviet missile bases in Cuba are being dismantled, their missiles and related equipment are being crated, and the fixed installations at these sites are being destroyed. Progress is now being made towards the restoration of peace in the Caribbean, and it is our firm hope and purpose that this progress shall go forward."
With the crisis resolved, it was time for Steele to get out of Cuba. He would do it the same way he came in. On his way out, he snagged a red metal Gitmo naval base sign warning of dangerous mines nearby. He still has it today.
So again, I got my leaf papers out with their big orange stripe and waited till everyone went out there, and I went running by, leave, leave. And they knew you couldn't leave. If you were stationed there, you couldn't leave there without leave. You had to have papers on you. Got on, went back to Beaufort, got off, went about my business. Wow. No one ever made reference to my having been there. I don't think anybody that knew anything knew I had been down there. My leaf papers said Nebraska.
While interviewing Steele at his home, I wanted to know how this escapade would have ended if he had been caught.
If someone would have captured me and really wanted to, that's court-martial. Going to a combat zone without permission. Oh, God.
Did you contemplate that before doing it? Because you would never get caught.
Funny thing, see? It never occurred to me. You're married with kids. You're going to risk a court-martial?
Especially when you're ostensibly excited and preparing to go back.
Have no effect. Your reasoning would have no reason to even consider it. And then it was the same thing with that helicopter assault. I wasn't supposed to be there. That could have been a court-martial.
Were you always growing up willing to take risks like that could get you in major trouble, and as long as you don't get caught, it's okay?
Well, nothing to that degree, but...
Right. You were okay not following every single rule or pushing the limits a little bit every so often. But again, the full ramifications of if it had gone wrong in these military things, court-martial and things like that, didn't really cross your mind when you made these decisions to do it.
And in either case, a court-martial means I'd have bounced out.
What a different path that would have been.
No retirement.
Yeah.
Kicked out with a bad conduct discharge.
It's likely Steele's training as a risk-taking recon soldier influenced his decision-making, and military bureaucracy was often a slow-grinding machine.
If you stick with protocol and all that stuff, you never get anywhere. And someone told me once, it's better to do what you want and then apologize than to ask permission and be told no. Boy, I really hung on to that one.
Steele wouldn't get caught in Cuba and wouldn't get bounced out. He had a long career ahead of him. In late November 1964, Steele and 42 other Marines were sent to Roosevelt Roads Naval Station in Puerto Rico for submarine training aboard the USS Sea Lion for 17 days. The men would receive extra hazardous duty pay for their efforts, according to records Steele has kept for more than 60 years. In 1965, Steele is sent abroad to another hotspot, the Dominican Republic. U.S. President Lyndon B. Johnson was the commander-in-chief by then, following the assassination of President Kennedy in November 1963. President Johnson said the American dream must go beyond our borders. Here are excerpts of his State of the Union address to the nation in January 1965.
Our own freedom and growth have never been the final goal of the American dream. We were never meant to be an oasis of liberty and abundance in a worldwide desert of disappointed dreams. Our nation was created to help strike away the chains of ignorance and misery and tyranny. In this period, no new nation has become communist, and the unity of the communist empire has begun to crumble. We seek not to extend the power of America, but the progress of humanity. We seek not to dominate others, but to strengthen the freedom of all people.
This speech was given mere months before Johnson officially sent U.S. combat troops into Vietnam and launched Operation Power Pack in the Dominican Republic. What began as an American evacuation operation during the Dominican Civil War would become a U.S. military invasion. Now a captain, Steele and other Marines would be dispatched in a hurry. Steele's wife and my grandmother, Marlene Steele, remembers the time well. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, a military family friend was downtown when military trucks traveled through with a bullhorn, calling all military personnel to board with no notice.
The town was empty within minutes, and all the men were gone, and the women were all just standing there.
And they weren't told anything.
What just happened here? The men were gone. Women were all like, and if they had no way home, they had to ask people to help me. I don't have a way home. Whatever. It was not the Marine Corps' concern. And when he went to Santo Domingo, same thing. They said, jump on the truck and go.
They called up, and we were living out a couple miles from town. They called up and said, we're deploying. Be here in 30 minutes. I was 45 minutes away.
But it was the same effect. They took our husbands and they were gone. And we didn't know where they went. And nobody told us anything.
When their husbands disappeared on secret operations, some of the Recon wives devised a way to figure out where they went. Marlene said they would look to see what kind of gear was missing: cold weather, hot weather, or regular gear. Then they would look in the newspaper to see where the hot spots of action were in the world and see how many soldiers were sent. When the soldiers returned home, they were surprised to learn their wives had figured out their location. By April 1965, an attempted coup and anti-government protests had turned into a civil war in the Dominican Republic, a Latin American island nation that borders Haiti. Rebel forces called Constitutionalists sought to reinstate the former ousted president. The rebels opposed U.S.-backed loyalist forces now in power. The rebels established defensive positions around the capital of Santo Domingo and took hostage some families of loyalist Air Force pilots. Guns were distributed to civilians. As revolt took hold of the capital city, Americans were told to evacuate. Rebels fired shots over the heads of American evacuees gathered at the Hotel Embajador, and the U.S. Embassy came under sniper fire. U.S. diplomatic attempts for a lasting ceasefire had been unsuccessful. President Johnson didn't want the Dominican Republic to become another Cuba in the Western Hemisphere and believed it was time to intervene. Nearly 24,000 U.S. troops were deployed to the Dominican Republic by May 1965. Getting quality intelligence during the Civil War and translators would be difficult, but separating the warring groups would eventually help restore order to the city. For his part, Steele would be sent with the U.S. Army's 82nd Airborne Division to deal with rebel combatants. A couple months earlier in the States, he had completed a 6-day airborne naval gunfire spotter course and a 9-week aerial observation class. Steele's military records and letters show he was in the Dominican Republic multiple times. In a May 12, 1965 letter, he told his wife Marlene they sent him to the resort town of Boca Chica, 35 miles east of Santo Domingo, which had a beautiful beach. He wasn't there long. Quote, "I couldn't see laying around out there, though, so I pulled a couple strings and came back in about an hour after we got there. I am now flying as aerial observer for the Army. Flew 3.5 hours yesterday and 3 already today, and it's only 1300 or 1 o'clock. Steele said he would try for a second hop that same afternoon. Quote, "There is no word on how long we'll be here. It all depends on what the rebels decide to do politically. If they agree to a new government, it'll be over in a flash. I hope they do try to fight their way out, because that would provide about 1 day of busy activity, and then it would all be over," Steele wrote. He was also in the Dominican Republic for more than a month, from June 18th to July 24th, 1965. In the Dominican Republic, Steele climbed aboard an H-13 Sioux helicopter, the same kind featured in the show MASH.
Okay, in Santo Domingo, there was an Army rebel force south of the main road, and then the friendlies were on the north side. Well, the Oklahoma River came up, and then there was their section, our section. Well, a damn tank was shooting down into where our troops were, and we could not find him. We had the Marines, all the air observers up in the air, and the Army 82nd Airborne I was attached to had a Korean War vintage plastic bubble with wires going back. That little 2-man bubble didn't even have a body, just the poles going back and the whirly-bird thing in the back, like on MASH. So I wheeled my way aboard that thing, and we were flying along. And so we looked and looked and looked. We could not find the tank. So we're coming back out to the airfield where our base was. And come like this. And about that time, a plane came around. It was a military plane, but it was like a transport, like a Beechcraft, comfortable seats on it. So he came around, and our pilot, my pilot, saw we were about to have a collision. And he did this right when that gun fired. The tank fired around, and dirt, dust and everything. I'm looking right at him. Pure luck. I had no skill involved whatsoever. And so I called in 106 recoilless rifle on it and blew that thing apart. But We could have flown those same things for days. We didn't ever. What he did, he'd come out and shoot. He'd back into the house, knock the wall down, come back in there, the roof's over him. It was so smart. But I got a real kick out of that because the Army Division headquarters had a briefing every evening, and they said, "Oh, today our airborne aerial observation platform." They didn't say helicopter. He spotted that tank and knocked it out. And my Marine boss had come down just to visit. He didn't have any control over us, but he was right here. He said, oh, by the way, if you want more details, that observer was Captain Steele. And he's right here if you want to talk to him. Oh, that made him mad.
Really?
Oh, because they tooted that as a, like going to end the war by ourselves or something. Oh, they were mad.
Steele's work in the Dominican Republic with a naval gunfire spot team would also receive attention. A photo of Steele throwing a grenade into a building was published in a national magazine alongside an article titled U.S. Troops in Santo Domingo, The Grim Price of Power.
While this picture is being taken and put in the magazine, the president is on the television saying, "We're only in the advisor.
We're not fighting those people. We're there as peacekeepers." And the guy was like 4 blocks away with a telephoto lens.
So you didn't see him, probably.
Oh, no. He was down, across the line in our green zone that went between both sections so we could travel.
Steele mentioned the photo in a letter to his wife, May 9th, telling her to keep an eye out for his picture in Life magazine, as well as Time and Newsweek. 4 days earlier on May 5th, U.S. President Johnson addressed the American public, emphasizing the peaceful mission he authorized.
Our forces, American forces, were ordered in immediately to protect American lives. They have done that. They have attacked no one. And although some of our servicemen gave their lives, not a single American civilian or the civilian of any other nation, as a result of this protection, lost their lives. Our servicemen have already, since they landed on Wednesday night, evacuated 3,000 persons from 30 countries in the world from this little island. But more than 5,000 people, 1,500 of whom are Americans, the others are foreign nationals, are tonight awaiting evacuation as I speak. We just must get on with that job immediately.
But violence was escalating. President Johnson blamed communist conspirators and sent even more troops. Steele was already there and went to work doing what he does best.
But there was this guy needed to be knocked out, and I wanted to do that. So I went down and he said, "How do you know it was you?" Well, for starters, I got a K-bar right there. The Army didn't have them. Got a camouflage cover on my helmet, and it's just no question.
The photographer even sent Steele a copy of the photo. It was signed by a high-ranking Army colonel.
To Captain Jim Steele, outstanding 5th Marine, Colonel Butch Kendrick, 2nd Brigade, 82nd Airborne Division, U.S. Army. He was a brigade commander, and the Army brigade's the same as our regiment, so there's, oh God, it's big. He was in charge of all the Army guys down there.
Steele told Marlene in a letter June 24th he saw civilians loot 2 warehouses in the rebel zone on the waterfront. He also reflected on local living conditions during his time in the Dominican Republic. In a May 9th letter to his wife Marlene, Steele wrote, quote, "The lights went out again. It's on again, off again around here. When the electricity is on, the water is on. And when it's off, so is the water. We aren't supposed to drink the local water, but we wash in it. The town is just about what I expected. There is a very low living standard and a high on the hog class, but few in between. A good example is the doctor's office across the street. Of all the places that need to be clean and sterile, the doctor's office doesn't have running water. They have to come out and get water from a hole in the sidewalk where there is a faucet on the water line. It's another made-to-order area for communist activity. All they have to do is promise the people a decent living standard and enough to eat, and they're in solid. Steele wrote Marlene again July 1st, quote, "I didn't let the poverty bother me before, but it is really getting to me this time. When you see a family move into a shot-up house without a roof, it makes you think. I now think how unfortunate it is I can't throw myself whole hog and full force against poverty and injustice as it exists here. As much as I like the chance to hunt rebels, or anyone authorized by the boss for that matter, I feel I could really go wild for a worthwhile cause. I've looked in houses and seen nothing but a blanket and a bowl to eat out of. That's not right while so many have so much. Maybe there's still a chance for me, old sweetie. Someday I may let personal pride and glory take a back seat to something worthwhile." Ultimately, Operation Power Pack in the Dominican Republic involved 40,000 U.S. troops. It was hailed by some as a success for preventing the establishment of a communist government. The Soviet Union and other critics condemned the U.S. intervention as imperialism. The creation of an inter-American peace force would see about 6,000 U.S. troops stay in the Dominican Republic alongside Latin American forces until the country's 1966 presidential elections were conducted and power transferred peacefully. Some estimates say 3,000 Dominicans died in the Civil War. 27 U.S. soldiers also died, and 172 were wounded. Steele, however, emerged unscathed. His most harrowing adventures and challenges awaited him back in Vietnam. In Episode 3 of Reconnaissance Man, Steele takes us back to Vietnam and chronicles his combat deployment, getting shot, and enduring other trauma.
There was a guy laying outside, and it started to rain. He had a poncho up over him. So I remember I said, "Hey, there's room for you in the tent here. You don't have to stay out here and get wet." He didn't respond. I went somewhere and come back. "Hey, I told you, go in the tent." I kicked his foot and pulled up. There was no head.
This series was written and produced by me, Ashley McGlone, with editing and production assistance from Kayla Jimenez. Special thank you to the Lyndon B. Johnson Library, the John F. Kennedy Library Foundation, the U.S. National Archives, and other public domain sources. And thank you to Grandpa James Steele for his service and sharing his story. This podcast is supported by the Marine Reconnaissance Foundation, a nonprofit that supports reconnaissance Marines and their families. Visit reconfoundation.org to learn more. This podcast was recorded in Lake Forest, California, and at the San Mateo County Library's Belmont Library Makerspace.